Can you imagine getting a phone call that just stops your world?
Yeah.
Like a call that makes everything around you fade away and you just struggle to comprehend what you're hearing.
Yeah.
That's what happened to Amy when she learned her daughter's father. Shawn O'Brien was in the hospital with a fractured skull and bruises all over his body.
Wow.
It's every parent's worst nightmare. And it's just the beginning of a story that's full of twists and turns and a relentless search for the truth.
Oh, my goodness.
So today we're taking a deep dive into the death of Shawn O'Brien. We've got police reports, eyewitness accounts, and the family's own investigation,
Oh.
all pointing to a mystery that's haunted them for years.
What immediately grabs your attention in this case is the contrast between what the first responders thought and then the reality of Shawn's injuries. It's like looking at two completely different pictures.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. On one hand, you have the family being told Shawn had a seizure and a fall.
Right.
But then on the other hand, doctors are raising red flags, saying these injuries are much more consistent with like a violent struggle than just an accident.
Wow.
It's a discrepancy that sets the stage for a truly baffling case.
And as we dig into these sources, you'll see how these conflicting statements and this suspicious behavior and the unwavering determination of Shawn's daughter to find out the truth,
Yeah.
it turns this case into a real-life mystery that's captivating and heartbreaking.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go back to the beginning, July 22nd, 2006. It's a Saturday.
Okay.
And Amy is expecting her usual morning call from Shawn, but it never comes.
Ah.
Hours later, she gets that dreaded call from his sister.
Oh, no.
Shawn had been rushed to the hospital, unconscious and in critical condition.
So this is where this fog of confusion starts to roll in. So Shawn's sister and nephew had told the paramedics that he'd been having a seizure for over an hour.
Okay.
But the paramedics noticed several things that just did not line up with that initial assessment. Like there was blood oozing from between Shawn's toes, which is not something you usually see with a simple fall.
Right.
And his jaw was clenched so tight they couldn't even clear his airway.
It's that kind of detail that just makes you stop and say, wait, something's not right here. You know, it's a small but significant clue that hints at something much more sinister than just a seizure.
Exactly.
And then there's the fact that Shawn was unconscious, but he was breathing really heavily, which adds another layer of complexity.
Absolutely. And just to complicate matters even more, the fire department actually requested police backup
Oh, wow.
for what they called a combative seizure.
Wow.
Yet other responders described Shawn as completely unconscious.
So right from the get-go, you see these inconsistencies in the reports, like pieces of a puzzle that refuse to fit together.
Yeah, and these conflicting accounts will become a recurring theme throughout the whole investigation.
Okay.
So later, a police lieutenant arrives and talks to the paramedics. And according to his report, they told him that Shawn's only injury was a bitten mouth. He even claims that he saw Shawn conscious at the scene.
But that directly contradicts what the paramedics and Shawn's family saw. What could explain that difference in their accounts? It seems as if the lieutenant was intentionally downplaying how serious Shawn's condition was.
That's a good point. It definitely raises questions about how thorough the initial assessment was, or maybe even the objectivity of it.
Right.
And remember, he described Shawn's bedroom as neat and orderly, even though paramedics had noted bloodstains and general disarray.
That neat and orderly description takes on a whole new meaning when Shawn's sister Erin and Amy visit his apartment the next day. What they found is a far cry from what the lieutenant said.
Yeah, this is where the story takes a really disturbing turn. So they found way more blood than anyone expected. It wasn't just on the mattress. It was on
Right.
the walls, the bedding, even a chair in the kitchenette. The scene looked more like someone tried to clean up a crime scene in a hurry than the aftermath of a seizure.
It's a chilling discovery that makes you question the whole initial story.
Right.
And if the bloodstains weren't enough, they noticed that some of Shawn's belongings were missing, like a lamp, a barbell, his hammer, all gone.
Wow.
They even found a patch of fur that had been shaved off his dog's tail.
It's bizarre.
Yeah, it's so unsettling.
Yeah, those missing items and that shaved fur are really important details.
Yeah,
They suggest that maybe the scene was messed with on purpose, which, if true, could have really messed up important evidence.
absolutely. So faced with all these inconsistencies and a growing sense of unease, Amy decides she can't just wait for answers. She goes to the Cranston Police Department and tells them all her concerns.
Good for her.
She points out all the red flags, the discrepancies in the reports, Shawn's injuries, and the fact that Shawn had some issues with his roommate's girlfriend, Lynn.
It's a bold move by Amy. You can tell it's a mother's intuition and that desperate need to understand what happened to the father of her child.
Uh-huh.
And her concerns about Lynn are definitely worth looking into.
Yeah, she tells the police about Lynn's violent past, including a charge for attacking a former boyfriend.
Mm.
And she explains how Lynn had physically threatened and even assaulted Shawn multiple times.
Oh, wow.
It sounds like a really volatile relationship that could have easily escalated.
We can't forget that Amy and Aaron noticed fresh scratches on the roommate's face the very day Shawn died.
Right.
This just adds another layer to the story and raises serious questions about Lynn's potential involvement in Shawn's final hours.
It's like a web of suspicion is forming around Lynn, and those scratches on her boyfriend's face are a thread that can't be ignored. But before we dive into Lynn's possible role, we need to talk about what happened when the autopsy results came back.
Okay.
Those results added a whole other layer of intrigue to this already confusing case.
The medical examiner was really struck by how bad Shawn's injuries were.
Okay.
He confirmed that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, but he couldn't say for sure how that trauma happened.
So it's this catch-22. The police say they need a clear homicide ruling from the medical examiner
Right.
to move forward with a murder investigation.
Right.
But the medical examiner needs more evidence from the police to confidently make that ruling.
Exactly. And because of all those conflicting reports from the beginning,
Yeah.
and the chance that the crime scene was messed with,
Right.
the medical examiner said the cause of death was undetermined.
It's a huge blow for the family. They feel like they're hitting a wall,
Yeah.
even though the evidence, at least for them, points to something way worse than just a seizure and a fall.
But even though the medical examiner's ruling was unclear, the police did start an investigation. They talked to Shawn's roommate, who decided to get a lawyer, but he did let them search the house.
Okay.
They also questioned Lynn, his girlfriend, but what she said about what happened that weekend was vague and didn't have a lot of details.
And this is where the investigation takes a really weird turn. The police actually let Lynn write her boyfriend's statement for him.
That's not normal at all. It raises so many red flags. Why would investigators let someone who might be connected to the case, someone with a history of violence,
Right.
have any say in what another person says? It just doesn't make sense.
It's baffling. It's like they were giving Lynn a chance to change the story, to help herself.
Yeah, and it's during this interview that they find out about the fight between Lynn and her boyfriend.
The one with the scratches on his face.
That's the one. This just adds to the idea that Lynn is violent and makes those questions about her role in Shawn's death even bigger.
You would think that with this new information, the police would have at least questioned Lynn more.
Well, because of Rhode Island's laws about domestic violence, they did end up charging Lynn with assault and battery for that fight.
Okay.
But that was a separate charge not related to Shawn's case. And unfortunately, Lynn disappeared before they could ask her more about what happened when Shawn died.
What a frustrating turn of events. It feels like a missed opportunity to find out more about what Lynn might have known.
It is. Meanwhile, the police were trying to figure out what Shawn did in his last hours and find those missing things from his apartment.
Okay.
They followed a tip about a lamp maybe being thrown away in a landfill, but they didn't find anything.
They talked to Shawn's friends and family to try and piece together what he did that Friday night.
Right.
But it seems like nobody could say for sure when Shawn left the bar or what happened after he went home.
And the stories Lynn and her boyfriend gave about where they were that weekend were also really unclear.
Right.
There are gaps in their timelines and things didn't add up in their statements. It made it really hard for investigators to figure out what they were doing.
It's like they're trying to put together a puzzle without all the pieces.
Exactly. They had some information, but not enough to get a clear picture of what happened that weekend.
And the family just got more frustrated as months turned into years, with no real progress in the investigation. It felt like their search for answers was just stuck.
And that's when Natalia, Shawn's daughter, comes into the story.
Who was just a teenager when her father died.
Yes. Driven by the loss of her father and a promise she made to him when he was on life support, she decides to seek justice.
It's a pretty amazing and inspiring part of the story.
Yeah.
Natalia's determination to find out what happened to her father shows just how resilient people can be.
Right.
And the power of love and loyalty.
She wouldn't let her father's case just fade away. She wanted to make sure that his memory and the search for justice would continue.
You can really feel how determined she is.
Yeah.
This isn't just a daughter who lost her father.
Right.
This is a young woman who's become a fierce advocate.
She wants to hold those responsible for her father's death accountable for what they did. Her efforts show just how important it is to never give up and the difference one person can make when they refuse to be silenced. It's a reminder that even when things seem impossible, courage and determination can make a difference.
She contacted the police when she turned 18, wanting updates or any progress, but they didn't really give her any information. She tried again at 21 and then again at 25. Each time she faced the same obstacles, the same lack of progress. It seemed like the investigation had just stopped, leaving her with way more questions than answers.
But Natalia wouldn't give up. She took things into her own hands. She sent her father's autopsy report to a bunch of different forensic pathologists, and they all agreed that Shawn's injuries pointed to a homicide. One even gave her a sworn statement saying that,
Wow.
which really supported her suspicions.
With this new evidence and a growing sense of urgency, Natalia really stepped up her efforts. She contacted reporters, shared her story online, and demanded to see all the police records about her father's case.
She wanted to make sure that everyone knew about the inconsistencies and unanswered questions, hoping that public pressure would make the police take a second look at the case.
And finally, after years of Natalia's hard work, there was a breakthrough. In 2019, Cranston PD assigned a detective to review the case. It was a little bit of hope, a sign that maybe they were finally taking her seriously.
But that hope disappeared pretty quickly when the police seemed to backtrack on their earlier suspicion that Shawn was murdered.
Really?
Yeah. Now they were saying it was probably a medical event and then an accidental fall.
This change in their position, this back and forth between acknowledging foul play and then saying Shawn died from natural causes, just made the family more frustrated and distrustful.
Yeah, it felt like they were being lied to and the truth was still hidden.
And then a really disturbing fact came to light. The medical examiner admitted that the police had only given him a 2-page report.
Which probably prevented him from giving a more definitive answer about how Shawn died.
This raises some serious concerns about how thorough and transparent the initial investigation was. Did they keep important information from the medical examiner? Were they trying to push him towards a conclusion that they wanted? These are questions that need answers.
Right.
And that's not the only questionable thing Natalia found. Remember that weird entry in the 911 call log? The one from July 21st, the day before Shawn was found unconscious?
Yeah, the second call to Shawn's place that no one could explain.
Well, Natalia finally got to see those records.
Okay.
And the police were now saying that the call never happened. They said it was a backdated entry that had to do with the domestic assault case with Lynn and her boyfriend. Basically a clerical error, nothing more.
But Natalia didn't buy it. Especially after she found other records that contradicted what the police were saying about it being normal procedure. It seemed like a convenient way to get rid of a potentially important piece of evidence that didn't fit their story.
She started to think that something big happened at Shawn's apartment on July 21st. Something the police messed up and were now trying to cover up.
Yeah.
Maybe it was something that directly led to Shawn's death, or maybe it was something that would make them look bad. Either way, Natalia was sure that someone was hiding the truth.
And when you think about the fact that they never tested any of the evidence from Shawn's room, it's even worse.
Yeah.
The blood stains, the shaved fur, the missing things, all potential sources of DNA or other information, all left unexamined. It makes you think they were being negligent or even trying to hide evidence that could have led to the truth.
It's mind-boggling. It's hard to believe they wouldn't have tested everything, especially in a case with so many unanswered questions and things that don't add up.
It's this lack of thoroughness, this disregard for doing their job, right?
Yeah.
That has fueled Natalia's fight for justice all these years. She's sure the truth about her father's death is in those untested pieces of evidence locked away in a police evidence room, maybe purposely ignored or forgotten. It's a sad reminder that sometimes getting justice is a long and hard process.
It's heartbreaking. It makes you wonder, what will it take to finally get answers in Shawn's case? Will those responsible for his death ever face consequences? It's almost like they decided that Shawn's death was from a seizure and then just ignored anything that didn't fit that idea.
It really does seem that way. And it's even worse that the police tried to blame Natalia for speaking out. They said that all the media attention she brought to the case made Lynn and her boyfriend stop cooperating, and that hurt their investigation.
So they're saying that a daughter who wants answers about her father's death is somehow the reason they haven't made any progress.
Right.
It's just a way to avoid responsibility. And honestly, it's awful.
It is. Instead of admitting their own mistakes, they try to blame someone who's already been through so much.
And even though the police chief said they did everything they could, Natalia and her family didn't believe it.
Yeah.
They knew there was more to the story, more that could have been done.
Especially when you think about all the different things the police have said over the years.
Right.
First, they told a reporter that they thought Shawn was murdered. But then later, they told Natalia they thought it was a medical event.
It's so inconsistent, and it makes it hard to trust the investigation.
Exactly. It's like they were trying to please everyone, but also downplay the possibility that something bad happened. It's no wonder Natalia and her family felt like they were being messed around.
And after years of dead ends and no answers, the case was officially closed. The Attorney General's office looked at it twice, but said there wasn't enough evidence to say that something illegal happened. It felt like a final blow for the family.
But even with the case closed, Natalia didn't give up. She knew that someone out there knew what happened to her father. She held on to the hope that someday the truth would come out.
It's that belief that she wouldn't accept defeat that has kept Shawn's memory alive and fueled Natalia's search for answers. She's still talking to experts, looking at every detail of the case files, and keeping her father's story in the public eye, hoping that someone with information will come forward.
And her efforts have made a difference.
Right.
The case might be officially closed, but because of Natalia, it hasn't been forgotten.
Right.
She's made sure that her father's story reminds us that even when officials don't care, the search for justice can continue.
Yeah.
Driven by the love and determination of those who won't let the truth be buried.
So where does that leave us? We're left with a young man who died under suspicious circumstances, a crime scene that might have been tampered with different stories from witnesses, and a police investigation that seems to have been full of problems. It's a story with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
Was Shawn's death an accident? Or was it murder? What did Lynn and her boyfriend have to do with his last hours? Why didn't they test any of the important evidence?
And the biggest question of all,
Yeah.
will anyone be held responsible for Shawn's death?
It's a question that Natalia keeps asking, and it's one that deserves an answer. This deep dive has uncovered a complicated story of contradictions, missed opportunities, and a family that won't stop looking for justice. It shows us that sometimes the truth is hard to find, and the fight for justice can be really long and difficult. As you think about Shawn's story, think about what stood out to you. What other questions would you ask? We have links to more information on our website, including ways to send us tips if you know anything about this case. Even a small detail could be important.
And as we finish this deep dive, think about this. Could the truth about Shawn O'Brien's death be right in front of us, hidden by years of conflicting stories and mistakes by investigators? Maybe with fresh eyes and a commitment to finding justice, the pieces of this puzzle can finally be put together.
The fight for justice for Shawn continues. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.